Death Metal, The Last 52, War of the Multiverses, Issue 1. Numerous creators involved. We'll tell you them as we go, because it varies book to book. Now, I read this digitally on Comixology, and there's a mistake. There's a pretty obvious mistake in the layout of these stories. I don't know if because sometimes they update them during the week or whatever, so I don't know if it changed after I read it or downloaded it, but basically, much like the big 80-page one with all the Teen Titans characters from a couple of weeks ago, this was clearly supposed to be bookended with the Wonder Woman story. However, on Comixology, at least, maybe it's been updated since I read it, but it actually just had both halves of that together at the start. And you can tell it was not only was it weird because it gets to like a certain page and it says interlude begins, and then I turned the page and it said end of interlude. I'm like, wait, that was weird. But not only that, when you get to the end and it tells you the credits for the artist, it says page 1 to 15 and then page 75 to 80, and I'm like, wait a minute. I did not get up to 80 pages in this, not yet.
So I heard about this and then I checked my physical copy, and the physical copy is fine.
Okay, so it's a digital version. It's not like a huge deal. It doesn't really affect that much, to be honest. But I think I'd have been more upset if it happened to the Teen Titans one from a few weeks ago, because I think it had spoilers, but the end of it also had more of emotional impact because of all the stories with all the characters in between. I think because this is just a collection, because essentially what this story is it's all set in the battlefield. It's all just little pockets of the big battle that's going on, focusing on the Bat family, the Super family, Wonder Woman, so on and so on. And then some weirder picks, there's a Ryan Choi Atom story, there's a Constantine one, so on and so on.
It is a mixed bag for sure.
It definitely is a mixed bag.
I up to this point, the 80-pagers have been, I don't know, I don't really like spending $9 for a comic.
Sure.
And I get it, you're paying for the pages. This was a lot of forgettable stuff that I almost... I think... I weirdly would have taken 2 books over just one.
Okay, I can understand that. I do think, though, that all the previous 80-page ones that have tied into Metal have been worth it so far. This is the one where I would say I would have minded this being a little shorter and a little cheaper, just to cut out a couple of the stories that were a bit weaker. But I will say, I do actually really like, again, the timing of this release is fantastic. Having this come out between issue 6 and 7, where the fight's just getting going, and then having like a big battle issue, which is just like all these different pockets of the fight on the ground, is actually a really smart little idea that makes it feel like a huge battle, and it'll impact. And I do think that it'll enhance the ending. It'll enhance where we start off issue 7 with the fight going on.
Well, especially if you read it bookended like that. So if you read 6 and the battle's getting started, then you read this and the battle's getting started, and then you have the interlude with all the little battles you spin around from, and then the way that interlude, the second half ends, to going right into 7.
Yeah.
So it was paced really, really well. I'll give it credit for that. But a lot of these stories, I felt like, and again, this is a short week, so like I didn't have much else to read, but I still felt like a slog to get through, because a lot of them I was like, okay, this is good, I guess. We'll get there. I do want to talk about the Penguin one, because I'm still 100% not sure what the hell happened in there.
Sure.
So yeah.
So the bookend is the Wonder Woman story, where she's in her gold armor that she forged from the lasso, and Batman, who laughs, or the Darkest Knight, is basically just telling her that she's screwed. Talks about how he's got all these various versions of heroes from worlds where Superman's evil, Aquaman's evil, so on and so on. And we jump around to various... probably the most interesting thing in this first story, though, is probably the stuff that happens with Wally and... and which is Arsenal, because they have this really sweet moment where Wally's fighting an evil Wally who likes killing, and kind of like, it's the idea that this is the Wally who enjoyed what happened in Heroes in Crisis, and is about to kill our Wally, and then the Arrow comes in and saves them, and it's kind of this sweet moment. It's giving them kind of an ending. Now, I still hate Heroes in Crisis. I still hate what it did to Wally.
Yeah.
But, I mean, as far as trying to make up for it, this is an okay moment.
And this is written by Williamson, right?
This is co-written by Williamson and Snyder, yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like this is them doing a make nice to people like us, going like, hey, remember that? We're not going to talk about it anymore after this.
Yeah, and then the rest of the Flash family show up. Jay's already there, but then you have Wallace and Max Mercury, Jesse Quick, Avery. The whole gang shows up.
Mhm.
And then we get into the other stories. Well, technically, I mean, for me, it just went on to the rest of the Wonder Woman story, which is what's next on. So even as I'm going through pages now, it's still in this order, so they've not fixed it on Comixology. But I mean, basically, all it really ends with is Wonder Woman saying that she's going to kick the Darkest Knight's ass. That's basically it. It's. But I mean, I enjoyed the Flash part of it for sure. And there's a wraparound to sort of like give context.
Yeah,
to the
this
fight.
is not one of the stories I had an issue with.
Yeah,
like this was all, and sure it could be because it's driving the metal story forward, but there are those character beats that I did like with Wally and Roy, because they finally get their closure, and just I like the idea too of the evil Wally wearing one of the masks from Heroes in Crisis that they had to wear, and that's like his thing, and he's carrying a gun, and there's
it's very Phantom of the Opera the way he's wearing it as well.
Yeah, it is, and it's all broken, and so it was. I liked all of that, and then the rest of the Wonder Woman one is just her, having basically a philosophical disagreement while fighting with the Darkest Knight.
Hope and peace versus death and despair and blah blah blah, the usual sort of stuff. The second story is the Super Family story, where Superman takes on. I mean, there's a whole host of like evil Supermen, but he takes on one in particular. The one that's got the sort of the fiery cape.
The last son.
Yeah. The son spelled with a U, just to be specific here. And he's trying to basically communicate with him. And classic Superman way, he's trying to avoid the fighting as much as he can. Even to the point where the Superboys are like, wait, why is he trying to talk to him? There's clearly no point. And Kara's like, don't worry, he's Superman, he's got this. Like, just let him do his thing. Of course, it breaks into a fight anyway. There's a lot of banter between the various, like the alternate Connor Kent's like saying, "Hey, nice coat, dude," and stuff like that, and they're bantering back and forth. And ultimately, Superman gets put down because the story ends. He's too weak to keep going because the anti-life's taken over, which ties into everything he's been going through in this metal world. And Kara kind of has to lead the Superman family at the end of the short into more battle, because that's the thing here, is that there's no definitive endings for a lot of these stories because it's all in the battle and it's all like it's not over.
It goes, so nice thing. Also, you have a lot of the supervillains that show up. You have the evil Superman. So Lex and the Eradicator and Henshaw and Zod, who I love the way that Zod comes in and is just talking crap. Unflailingly son of Jor-El. Yeah. It's just like, it's all real good. And so I like that it ties all that together, that at the end of the day, they still all stand for life, right? And that they're not going to let... Yeah,
that's what Lex says to Superman when he's picking him up. I actually kind of popped for this moment when all the villains show up to kind of save the day. It kind of like this idea that not every villain, or at least most villains in the DCU, actually want to destroy everything. They want to rule things. They want things to go their way and be in charge or whatever, or have power. Right. But they actually want the world still to exist so they can do something with it. The idea that everyone shows up to help here doesn't feel cheap or stupid in any way. So, Lex has got his giant mech suit, of course. It's the most mechy suit. I don't know if it's the most mechy suit he ever mech'd, but it's definitely chunkier than his usual suit. Yeah. Because he's got like a whole sort of like cockpit in this one, as opposed to just being a suit around him. It's
almost Ed 209.
Yes. And the traditional colors, of course. It's got the purple and the green.
Yes.
It's his colors for sure. I enjoyed the super story. I think for what I think
Pelletier art.
Yeah.
So it's pretty decent.
Who did some art, I think, for Supergirl once upon a time. So I think seeing her in that art again was nice. Because I think what I'd say about this as a whole, before we even get to the rest of the stories, is that I think even though some of them are better than others, I kind of like what it does as a whole. Even though I kind of agreed it probably should have been a bit shorter, just because it gives you all this like sense of all the different parts of the fight going on. So I didn't look at each story as like needing definitive endings like I normally would. Normally I'd go into these anthologies being annoyed that the stories don't have, but because it's all in the context of what's happening in the battle, it's like it all works.
Yeah.
So the Bat Family's next. And it's basically, so if you remember last issue of Metal, when Batman raises a bunch of people back from the dead to help fight, One of them is the Batman Who Laughs, and
Yes.
that might have been a bit of a head scratcher for some people. This entire short is about how that Batman Who Laughs, who's been raised with the blackest, the Black Lantern ring, is basically turns on Batman immediately. And it becomes this debate where he's like, I'm still technically part of the Batman Who Laughs. I'm not really him because he's actually the Darkest Knight. He's up there fighting Wonder Woman. But I'm still kind of part of him. So why did you think I was going to help you or fight on this side or whatever? And Batman basically Freddy Krueger's him. And if you wonder what I mean by that is that the rule in some of the later Nightmare on Elm Street sequels is that if Freddy is forgotten, he'll have no power. And Batman basically says, look, if you don't help me fight, like, I'm going to make sure that no one ever remembers you, and you will never be feared. You will never be remembered. You'll be forgotten, and you'll mean nothing. Well,
it's the whole idea of, sure, the Batman Who Laughs is what if Batman breaks bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's terrifying for everybody, and that's the ultimate fear for the Bat family. So they have to respect that, but at the same time, they have to live with that and have trust that Bruce isn't going to ever do that. So I did like that balance of that story there of you have to accept it. Like the fear is going to be there, but you don't let it rule because that's how the Batman Who Laughs wins. So overall meta storytelling wise, that's, I think, metal in a nutshell, right? At this point, the whole Doom versus, or what was the opposite? It wasn't Hope, was it?
What?
During Snyder's Justice
Doom
League
versus Justice. I assume.
Yeah,
It's
been a long year, guys.
Justice League was the clue.
Yeah, Justice. Yeah, it's right there. So, but yeah, it's the whole Doom versus Justice and all the stuff that Snyder has kind of seeded since.
Yeah,
this is kind of that in a nutshell, which I feel coming from Tynan, and not just as the Batman writer, but because he's a student. He came in
this is
through Snyder.
It's also Malieve on art for this one, and I do love Malieve. I do kind of think this underuses him a little bit because it's just these same two characters against an orange background the entire time, so it doesn't really it doesn't give him a chance to shine like he normally would. I don't think.
No, and so when it came to Malieve, I was like, this is very Malieve-esque, and I got to the end, and I was just like, it's off just enough that I didn't pick up on it right away.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
I think it's just because it's the same two characters who look very similar. They're all in black. The background's just constantly this orange because of the flames and whatever behind them. There's not a lot of variance in it, so it doesn't really give as much variance or a chance to shine that can normally, because normally Malieve is top tier. I love that Malieve's art, but certainly not. I mean, this is probably my least favorite of the stories so far, but I don't think it was bad.
No,
I don't think it was bad by any means.
No.
Next up is the Atom story with Ryan Choi. This is Kyle Higgins writing with Scott Collins on the art. This is a weird pocket here because not only are we dealing with the Atom, we're dealing with him trying to help Will Magnus use Mr. Terrific's T-spheres to control a new batch of metal men who will be able to fly and therefore disrupt the other worlds of the... There's a lot of big ideas thrown at me in this little story.
Yeah. And I appreciate Kyle Higgins. I don't want to make it sound like that, but this story didn't work all the way for me.
Mm-hmm.
This one is one of the ones that feels very just disposable, and I get what it's going for because at the heart of it, it's about science.
Yeah.
And corruption of science and misunderstandings and stuff. The alternate dark Atom, it was weird.
Honestly,
it just didn't work for me.
My biggest complaint of this issue is that after a while, it started to feel a little bit repetitive, that it kept being hero versus evil version of themselves, who we've not met yet, because we've met a lot of evil versions in previous metal stuff, but we hadn't met every evil version of every character. So seeing the evil version of Ryan Choi is new, so they wanted to throw him in there.
Yeah, and this is where people that get annoyed with continuity and stuff, I get where they're coming from, but it's not like DC didn't have a Tales from the Dark Multiverse where they could have been playing with these characters beforehand. And so especially when we get to the Lois story, that kind of irks me a little bit because you had something sitting there that was previously established that, if you took time to read, you were kind of rewarded.
Yeah.
But no, they just threw all this stuff out anyways. And here, this version of Atom, I think would have been cool to have because Higgins did a Dark Multiverse story.
Oh yeah,
He
yeah.
did
And there's a
the
little
Nightfall
bit
one.
there's a little bit of backstory here. I enjoyed the ending when Ryan getting big and like stomping on him. I did enjoy that page. It was a fun
I didn't
moment.
realize the Atom wasn't like Ant-Man and could do the reverse thing. So Atom's only going small, I guess. So I didn't realize that until now.
Oh, Adam can go big. I'm pretty sure
So
Palmer's
then
went
what
big.
was so when Terrific was telling him you've never gotten that big before, was that
Just that
just
big.
just that big? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So he's gotten
Because
big,
I
but
read it
never.
as he had never done the grow
Sure, no,
thing
no.
before.
I took it as he's been 10 foot tall, but he's not been 50 foot tall or whatever he
Okay.
got to. You know.
Gotcha.
Uh. So I mean, this one probably is a bit more disposable. Although I do kind of appreciate it because it is like such a wacky group of characters. You know, it's Ryan, Troy Atom, Mr. Terrific, and the Metal Men. It's a weird group. Like I can't deny that.
And I just feel that is something that I don't think like editorial came up with.
Mm-hmm.
I fully feel like that was Higgins being like, "Hey, I got an idea for a story," and they're like, "Sure, go for it."
I mean, they probably needed to like fill a couple of these slots. It's like, hey, we've got 8 pages. Higgins, do you want to do? So it's like, oh yeah, can I use any characters that are not already being used? Yeah, go for it. So, because it's the Lois story next, and I think when it comes to Lois, I think the point is that there's so many dark multiverses or dark universes that these things are taken from that. I think it'd have been more fun for us to have the Lois that came from that that one shot.
Yeah, but I don't like this story. Like even the dark spin on the story, I'm just like, like I don't know. It doesn't speak to who Lois is. Like I don't know. This one felt like a reach.
Sure.
Because I wanted to like this one because I love Lois Lane.
Yeah, so this is Regine Sawyer writing, who I'm not familiar with, and Aletha Martinez on art, who I'm also not familiar with.
I like the art.
Yeah, the art's actually the art's got like a early 2000s sort of chunkiness to it, but in a good way, in a way that I kind of like. But yeah, it's all about this evil Lois who shoved some amber kryptonite into her Superman. Which is interesting because this Lois from this other Earth has a son named John, but doesn't seem to be with Superman in a relationship.
Yeah, it wasn't very clear because it seemed like Maxima's involved, right? So Maxima ends up on her world, ends up fighting Superman. As I drop my iPad, ends up fighting Superman, and it causes the death of Lois's son. So Lois gets some amber kryptonite, which not only rips Superman's powers away and kills him, but gives her the powers. So then she, goes and takes out the entire Justice League, because no heroes, and then spreads it amongst all the people. And I'm just like,
I don't think the kryptonite actually killed him. I think it just takes away or drains his powers and gives it to her.
Oh, that's right. It drains his power, and then she cut off his damn head.
Because she cuts off his head. Yes, I believe the cutting off the head was her doing rather than the kryptonite.
Yeah, that's right.
Because she's walking around with the decapitated head. She's got the head with her.
Right. Right.
And she's got. I think it's funny though. She's got all of her followers have got like S symbols with the the censor sign over it, but she's still wearing the S on her suit, and I'm like, that's a bit weird.
That is.
It's a bit weird, but
definitely.
I didn't think it was badly told though. Conceptually, it's all a bit weird.
Yeah. No, it's not badly told. I think it the story flows and stuff, but just for Lois, and this is her coming up with her darkness. It didn't land.
Because the part of this I did like was Lois's narration talking about how, yeah, of course, at some point in the early days, she did consider for a second, what if the Justice League turns bad? Like, what if the superheroes do get power mad or something? Like, of course, and it's the same reason why Batman was suspected of all the heroes at first as well. That the idea that what if these superpowered individuals just happen to decide one day that they've snapped and they're not going to be good guys anymore? That and how much of a problem that could be. It's only human nature to consider the possibility that could happen. So, and I like the idea that Lois especially has thought of that in the past because it's an interesting part of her character given how close she is with Superman that she has at some point thought of the possibility. So I like that part of it. Just the actual story of the evil Lois and what world she came from is just whatever.
And I do like where it ends because the evil Lois wants her to scream for Superman so evil Lois can show up and kill him, or when he shows up she can kill him. But she's like, I know I don't have to scream. I know I trust in Clark enough that he'll know that I'm falling. He'll catch me.
Yeah, or even just the idea
as we
that
saw in the other story, it's like Lois, you're a little bit too trusting there, dear.
but but I like the idea that it's because, especially since like a lot of characters are dying in this story because everyone's going to be reset anyway, right? And I love the idea that this evil Lois wants to kill Superman, and she's going to use this Lois, our Lois, as bait. And the idea that our Lois is heroic enough to let herself die to not have Superman be killed. The idea that she'll let herself fall to her death to not let Superman come and save her. So that he will survive and hopefully win this war that is currently going on. That's kind of a good Lois moment. This idea that she won't like lure him there. That's actually kind of a really strong beat for her.
Yeah.
So I think the actual character beats for our Lois in this are quite good.
Yes, it's just for me, for what the darkness was supposed to represent against her. You know what I mean? Just I wasn't digging that story at all. It felt like a little bit too much. You know, especially because the one that we had read was her being, you know, consumed by the death of Superman and what that drove her to do. And it's been a while since I read that one, so I don't remember.
It's been a while, yeah.
But just like, or the idea of Dark Lois completely falling in with her dad, right? Her like I just kind of wish there was that aspect there, that, you know, that she sided more with Sam Lane, you know, and that's what drove the darkness and the not trust of the Justice League, and, you know, that kind of stuff.
I think I'm more positive on this Lois story than you, just because I like all the Lois, like our Lois, like her beats, her worries, her fears, her moment at the end where she chooses not to scream. Like all those moments for me worked really well. I don't really like the evil version of Lois in this, but it doesn't really matter too much because it's not about her as it is about our Lois.
No, but I got distracted by it and being like thinking of just the logistics of that Dark Earth and whatnot.
Okay,
like,
sure.
Okay.
I guess what I'm saying though is I would keep this one. If I'm trying to cut this book down, I would keep this Lois story in here. Whereas the next one, which I don't think the next one's bad, but I would cut it.
No.
This is the Raven Teen Titans story, written by Chi Grayson and art by Pop Man.
I like the art.
Oh, the art's good.
We established we like Pop Man when they, I think it was a Teen Titans book, or it was a Titans book.
That sounds right.
They're reading.
Because obviously there's the evil version of the Teen Titans show up of her team, and it's like an evil Beast Boy. Evil. I mean, the one thing I will say about this in terms of what I liked is there's a page where when Evil Raven, who's red, shows up, there's just little like bubbles of windows around her. They basically in one panel each shows you the concept of each of the evil Teen Titans. So it's actually quite good how succinct it is, because it's like, okay, like basically it's an Emmy who followed her mother's teachings. It's a Damien who sided with Ra's al Ghul. It's a Aqualad who followed his father's footsteps. It's a Beast Boy who went with Terra instead of you know. So it very.
Starfire killing her sister.
Yeah, so it very neatly says these are the key decisions and people they followed that set them down their darker path. So I thought that was quite a good page, and just very neatly expressing all that. The overall story though, which is just, you know, this is a Teen Titans that are actually led by Trigon, and Trigon.
Well, yeah, Trigon. Yeah, Trigon who successfully possessed Raven, right? Like and stuff. So yeah, no, this one felt long compared to like. So there's stuff I didn't like in the Lois one, but it was a quick read.
Yeah.
This one I felt like took forever to get through. Like, I was going through and I was just like, okay, all right. There'll be another one like that later.
Yeah, like I say, there's a couple of things in here. I mean, I like the art and I like that page because it's really succinct in how it tells, it tells his backstory for like 6 different characters without feeling overwhelming. It's actually really impressive, but. Yeah. The actual story, and at this point, I'm like, okay, we have 5 evil versions of our 5 main characters. We're doing this kind of over and over at this point. I'm a little bit tired of the formula. So, yeah, I would cut this one out for sure, even though I do think there's a couple of really good qualities mixed in. So, that's the Teen Titans one. Then we have the Penguin one. So when I saw in the credits there was a Penguin story, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
A Penguin story. But sure enough, we have this Penguin story where Penguin's fighting, multiple dark multiverse versions of himself. One of whom was giving me some major Danny DeVito from Batman Returns vibes.
Yeah.
But basically his narration is about how he's a villain. He does these things, but he's all about the machine. He's all about the system and keeping the criminal enterprise and the way the city works in place. And he's always about maintaining that kind of status quo. That there's a logic to it. There's a system to it. He's not a nice man by any means, but he doesn't want just chaos.
No, and people fail, but he's the constant in Gotham, right?
Mm-hmm.
For all of Joker's crazy schemes or Two-Face and his giant coins, Penguin's just there controlling the criminal enterprises.
And
And
that
it's
and that
almost
and that ties in with
like,
like Joker World, the idea that he's got like a safe room. Whenever Joker's doing his big
right,
stuff, he's like, no, I'm just going to hide. I'm going to hunker down,
uh-huh,
and I'm going to emerge after the chaos.
right. And that's what he's used to. He knows how to wade through the chaos. So, the Darkest Knight throwing three twisted versions of himself. Okay, I know how to deal with this. I really like this as a character piece on the Penguin.
Mm-hmm.
Like this one worked a whole lot. That said,
The ending's kind of wild.
does he turn into a giant bird? Or is that just supposed to be his like mindset? Like he's actually in reality, people are just watching him disassemble these guys, right? But in his head, he's a gigantic terror bird.
Well, so
I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. So it looks like he's being eaten by the big green version of a penguin, right? And I don't know. Yeah, if it's metaphorical, the idea that he's ripping out from within as this giant bird, or if it's something to do with like, oh, he can control this green penguin who can morph or something like that. So he turns him into a giant freaking bird. Because in the last page, after you see like this giant bird that the penguin's like controlling, killing everything. Although he does kill the big green one as well. Like in the final page, we see this bird kind of like roar. Or squawk, I suppose, is more of a bird noise. But we see like sort of like the see-through window, the transparent window in the middle to show us where Penguin is, and he's like in there just sort of yelling. To me, this feels metaphorical. It feels like the Penguin's mirroring his movements, and it's just like no, he's went wild, and he's let the inner like
It's Penguin's berserker rage.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's what I wanted to make sure, because if Penguin just became a giant bird,
I don't think so.
I don't know how he's not a dark penguin.
Oh, sure.
Right?
But I will say the art here is wild. The story's kind of surprisingly interesting. This is Margaret Bennett writing this one with Inaki Miranda on the art. And I do think the art is... I wasn't necessarily in love with it right away, but once it started getting to the big bird stuff, I was like, you know what? This is starting to grow on me a little bit.
Yeah, it's very, like, creature-y. Like, it's not typical in DC.
Yeah.
Like, you'd see this more in, like, Dark Horse or, like, Image in the early days. Like, it reminded me of stuff that I used to see in Wizard that Image was putting out. Something like in Savage Dragon. But it fit the story.
This is such a specific
really well.
character and story to do that. I have to imagine again, this was like Margaret Bennett had this idea and pitched like, hey, can I do a penguin story in this or whatever? Because it's just I can't imagine DC being like, or editorial being like, all right, we need a penguin story. Who wants to write a penguin story? And this is what someone comes up with.
In death metal, like we need to know what his fate is. But yeah, him turning into a giant bird, I was here for it. Like monster penguin and stuff. I just didn't understand the mechanism that turned him, but as it's supposed to be, as long as you read it as metaphorical too, then I'm okay.
I did.
I mean, it was that last page that really did it, because flipping through and seeing him turn, I was like, what is going on here?
Here's the thing though. See if it isn't metaphorical. If someone says that here's why this isn't metaphorical, I'm kind of okay with it because it's metal and everyone's doing weird shit anyway, so it's fine.
Right. I just wish it was just a little bit more clear. You know what I mean? Like, but yeah, no, Penguin is probably a underrated Batman villain. I mean, Joker takes up a lot of the air, and we have the Danny DeVito version, but I can't think of any other iconic versions of Penguin. And don't at me with Gotham, because I only watched like 6 episodes. I'm sure it was fine.
Honestly, it's kind of funny how much of a sort of squirmy little serial killer is in that show, from what I've seen.
Yeah. Well, see, I'd always liked the idea of there were rumors of Nolan for Dark Knight Rises, like what he was gonna do, and I always remember hearing like Philip Seymour Hoffman as Penguin, and just the idea of him being this, what we just talked about, like he keeps the underground alive, like he is basically an accountant for crime, and he keeps everything on the bottom level, and I really like that idea of him, and we never got it, right? Because he went with No Man's Land and Bane. So, but yeah, I think the story does it really, really well.
It was a surprising one. There was a surprising find in this book. The next story, I will say, I think what's interesting about this next story, the Constantine story, is that I actually think the story's worth telling, and it has quite an amusing twist to it. And it's actually written by Matthew Rosenberg, who I've really liked some of his work at Marvel. So
Yeah.
there was see that. I do think it probably should have been a story that was like separate and put somewhere else. I don't know if it fits in this, because like the jarring tonal shift and art shift when I got to this first page of this story, it was like, whoa, wait a minute.
It's definitely the art shift, and I like Rob Guillory. The cartoony style works, just not compared to the other ones here. Even if this was just different art, I feel that the story still fits here.
Sure.
For Constantine, because it is a Constantine story. But yeah, art definitely.
I could have easily seen this, because it's such a funny little idea for a story, that you could have just sort of altered some of the start of it so it's not on the battlefield of metal, and just done this story some other way somewhere else. But the story is that much like some of these other stories, it's him meeting the dark multiverse version of himself, and it's this more kind of like heavy metal version of John Constantine, who is basically winning the fight. But the joke is that they basically says, hey, there's a pub over there, how about we go and have a drink before you kill me? And they basically shoot the shit a little bit, and note the slight differences between them, with the understanding that evil Constantine is going to kill good Constantine by the end. Although he starts to come around and says, maybe you could join our side, mate. Like, I'll talk to the Batman who laughs, and
you're pretty flexible.
Yeah.
I also love the dig at you're me if I ever got into heavy metal. I'd love that coming from Constantine. Also, I'd love to pick Connor's brain on this one, being that he's from England. This came off as someone that hasn't lived in England trying to write British slang. Did you get that too?
There was one that stuck out to me. It's when Constantine. I don't know what Constantine it was, I can't remember, but one of them refers to one of the Supermen as an absolute unit, and that is something that an English person would say. I don't know if I necessarily imagine Constantine saying that, though. So that one stuck out to me.
Well, there was that one, and he said something about going to the Tesco's.
Oh yeah, go to Are you familiar with Tesco, Matt? Have you ever heard of Tesco?
The only reason I know is because of our friend James talking about Tesco.
Okay.
on Twitter and in the Facebook group.
It's just one of the supermarket. If anyone doesn't know, it's just one of the supermarket chains. There's nothing special.
He also calls everybody tossers, which I think I've never actually heard a British person actually say that and mean it. Like there's other words.
It's a bit more. I think it's more of an 80s thing. Like there's definitely like British sitcoms from the 80s that would use it and it sounds more natural. Maybe it's like its time has kind of been and gone. Yeah, it might be it wouldn't surprise me if Rosenberg has watched a lot of like stuff like from the 80s, and that's where some of this language is coming from.
And again, it's fine. I had to make sure before I said anything. Rosenberg isn't British. Because if I said that,
I don't actually know. I don't know where Rosenberg's from.
He's not.
Okay.
It says he's listed as American. Now, did he grow up? I don't know. So if this gets back to them, I apologize. But it just it read like someone, where people don't talk like that, right? Like when you're reading dialogue, that it came off. It's not trying.
It's not the worst example of it I've found. I've definitely had this as well in the past, where you'll have like, and not even just like British stuff, like, because obviously I'm fairly familiar with how English people speak, and obviously I know how Scottish people speak, so I notice when those sound a bit over the top. But I'll even notice it when it's like something else where it feels like someone they'll be writing like an Australian character, for example, and there'll just be too many Australianisms, and a quick span of time, you just feel it feels a bit forced, and it's just a bit too much.
They throw mate at the end of everything.
Yeah. So,
but no, but I will say I will enjoy it, but the tonal shift of this one compared to some of the other ones it gave me whiplash almost.
I feel like if you did want to split this into 2 books, I feel like if you have a more jokey fun was the second book, this would be good in that one as opposed to the main one. But it wasn't a bad story. There was a wit to it, and obviously the story is that because he checks to make sure, because evil Constantine insists on pouring the drinks to make sure that Constantine's not done anything to them to poison them. But the joke ends up being that Constantine doesn't take ice in these drinks, so he actually poisoned the ice. So eventually, evil Constantine vomits out tons of blood and dies. And Constantine says you'll get back to the fight maybe after another drink. So you know, it's just the actual story is good. It is a bit of a real tonal shift. And then the final story, I think this is the monsters, not counting, of course, the wraparound to Wonder Woman, but there is a Swamp Thing narrating a story about all the monsters. So you got Grundy there, you got Frankenstein, Clayface, which I'm all for a story with all these characters together.
Could have used way more of these monsters instead of just another Swamp Thing story, because I'm starting to get tired of Swamp Thing stories. I think Swamp Thing's a great character, but I feel like everyone's getting to tell their Swamp Thing story, and there's just a lot of them right now.
How's there a lot of them?
So I've read a lot of these like anthology style ones, and there's always a Swamp Thing story, right?
That's because people love Swamp Thing, and there's no Swamp Thing book. At least there will be soon, but there hasn't been a Swamp Thing book for a while. So people are chomping at the bit to tell some Swamp Thing stories.
That's fine. A lot of the stories don't add up to a good Swamp Thing story.
Are you just mad that Swamp Thing's better than Frankenstein? Is that what this is?
No. I have no attachment to Frankenstein.
That's a Tim thing. Sorry, that's a Tim.
Yeah, that is a Tim thing. If you're talking about the Wolfman, then we'll battle.
Oh yeah, Wolfman's a chump. But
no, he's not. Wolfman has nards. No, just a story. I don't know. Just it starts off strong with all these monsters. I'm like, oh cool, we'll see what the monsters are up to. And it's Justin Jordan, and I'm familiar a little bit with Justin Jordan at DC, and like, okay, and then it just becomes this is Swamp Thing who renounced his humanity because he didn't have Alec Holland's soul, just his body.
The evil one, that's from the multiverse.
The evil one, right? And he becomes the Swamp King, and
I like that name.
Takes over.
Oh, Matt, your mate's gone. Your mate's gone. Mm-hmm. I like the Swamp Kings because it actually still sounds a lot like Swamp Thing, so it's a nice
and it works, right? And so he takes over all the parliaments and ends up being all about life, but there's no point to life when it's all full just through the green. And it was a long way to go. Like this was like 3 pages too long, I think.
Yeah, I think I conceptually like the story a lot more than I actually like the story, and how it plays out. I love the idea of like Swamp Thing kind of, being able to win this and being able to sort of do this because he has the soul and so on and so on. But I would cut this one out. I think the 3 I would have cut out are this one, the Teen Titans one, and the one that was before the Lois one. What was that? What was before Lois?
That was the.
Oh God.
Yeah, we're bad.
It's too many stories. I can't remember them all.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's probably like 3 I would have cut, and then maybe the Constantine one is still good, but could have been put elsewhere. Would maybe the Atom Metal Men one, yeah. So, and people might disagree with which ones to cut or whatever. I think you get this down by 30 pages to about 50. You charge $5 or $6 instead of the 9.
And if it wasn't the third 80-page we've gotten, I think that makes a big difference too, because it's just.
I mean, and there is one next week, but the one next week is super interesting because it's the Generations one. So I'm actually that's probably the
not a metal 80-page. Yeah.
I'm actually really excited for that one next week because of what it is. But
and it's Jurgens, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, Jurgens doesn't really let me down, so I'll be okay with that one. And it seems to be more focused. Like this had focus, but these are kind of a crapshoot. When you look at the table of contents, you're like, oh, a Penguin story, oh, a Lois story. Yeah,
but the Penguin story ended up being one of the better stories in the book, which is funny.
But what I mean by a crapshoot is it's generations we know. This is Superboy from the 50s and the original Batman, and there's a thing to it. So.
It's maybe a bit of a mixed bag. I do think this is still a pretty solid one shot overall, all things considered. But it probably could have been trimmed down a little bit and some fat trimmed and made a bit cheaper, but and make it a bit less of a slog. I think a 60-pager here instead of an 80-pager would have went maybe a long way to overall its overall acceptance. But not bad though. I mean, I think on the whole, I've said this repeatedly, but I think on the whole, the metal tie-ins have actually been quite a successful story. There's been 1 or 2 weak ones, but for the most part, they've all fit really neatly into where the story is. And they've kind of enhanced it if you're enjoying what's going on, and if you don't, you can skip them. But if you're not enjoying metal in general, then you're in a weird place because it's always frustrating when the big universe story that's everything's focusing on is not to your taste, or you don't think it's very good. And I've been there in the past where I've hated the main event and it's been a nightmare. But that's basically it. Obviously, it goes back to the Wonder Woman story, which again, as we said earlier, ends with her saying, "I'll kick your ass." Like cliffhanger, come back from Metal 7 next week where it all wraps up. So yeah. It's always weird rating these ones because they're such a mixed bag. But what you rating the whole shebang?
This is tough. I guess 6.5 is pretty fair.
Like, yeah, I was thinking 7. I think it's good overall. There's some better than others, but there's a couple of real nice surprises in there, and even a couple that I don't like. There's at least things in them I like on their own. Like the Titan story had a couple of those ideas or pages that I really liked, or I don't know if there was any one that I outright just hated from start to finish and had no redeeming qualities. Like everything had something at least, and some of them I liked overall. So, And as much as the Lois one might not have been the best story overall, I do actually think a couple of those character beats might be some of the strongest moments in the whole book.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking about it. So yeah, solid 7 for me. You get a 6.5. That's cool.
Yep.